Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our webinar today, Assessing the Health of Your Sales Enablement Program. I'm Justin Bursino, Director of Content at ATD, and I will be your moderator today. I'm very pleased to introduce today's speaker, Eli Cohen. Eli is the CEO and co-founder of Saleshood and author of Enablement Mastery and Saleshood. He's recognized as the top innovative mover and shaker in sales leadership by Entrepreneur Magazine and by LinkedIn is one of the world's top sales experts. Eli, thanks for spending your afternoon with us. You can go ahead and take it away.
Thank you. And thank you, ATD, for co-hosting this with us. I wanted to spend a couple minutes before we dig into the topic because there are a lot of new folks here that I haven't met before. And I thought it'd be important to just build a little bit on what you described as some of my background. Mover shaker, I love it. I've written a couple books, Enablement Mastery, and we'll have an offer at the end for folks who are interested. But listen, I'm an enablement practitioner. You know, I worked at Salesforce.com for 8 years running enablement. I was a senior vice president of enablement during the hypergrowth years. I left, I founded my company Saleshood, and Saleshood is a sales enablement platform company. And we're recognizing the industry for software, but also for our education and our thought leadership. So for those of you who are here, we're going to have an amazing talk. We're going to walk through the, a maturity model so you can assess the health of your enablement programs, and really just excited to be here. And what can I say? I'm going to anything else in my background? Yeah, I'm gonna pop open, kind of the slides. And oh yeah, there was one more thing I want to do, Justin. Listen, we've got a bunch of people here, and it's so interesting for me, and it's interesting to hear from you before we even start. Right? Like enablement I'm so passionate about enablement. We're so passionate about helping to elevate the profession. And we're so passionate about helping you be the best you can be and have the biggest impact in your businesses and your careers. But I'm curious, who's all in the audience? So can we run the first poll? Curious if you're in training or you're in enablement or you're in HR or you're in sales. Let's just run a little poll. Before we dig into the presentation, I love it. Pick your choice. Take a minute, share with us what your role is. And, I saw the percentage split on the reg list, but now we get to see it here. And so, let's see here. I'm going to also click mine. There you go. Hosts and panelists can't vote. All right. How you doing on the percentage completion of the poll?
Almost. Just a couple of more seconds and we'll be there.
I got it. Aren't you all curious? Who's all on the call? I'm curious. Justin, are you curious?
Yeah, I think it's always interesting with roles and titles in this field. You can have people that have the same title and do two totally different things. So
look at this. So more than half of you are in enablement, and about 40% of you are in training, and we've got, some marketing. So amazing. Great. So this is perfect. So I'll be able to really focus in the conversation now. And like Justin said, interactive, collaborative, we're monitoring the feed, and please post questions as you may. So let me pop open some slides. I love just kind of anchoring us around some data. So again, assessing the health of your sales enablement, of your revenue enablement programs. And boom, my name's Eli Cohen, CEO and co-founder of Saleshood, and just excited to be here. So let me start here. It's amazing. There are 45,000 enablement practitioners, enablement professionals around the world. When I was at Salesforce, when we created sales enablement back in 2005, 2006, this didn't exist. You can Google sales enablement and go back, Google Trends, look at 2005, and you'll see flatline. It wasn't there. And it's amazing. Today we have 45,000. Now, what's even more amazing is 16,000 of us have been in role less than a year. Just internalize that for a second. There are 16,000 people with sales enablement, with enablement in their business title on LinkedIn who have been in role less than a year. That's a lot of new people. That's a lot of first-time enablement people. There are 15,000 that have only been in enablement 1 to 2 years. And then there are only 2,500 of us that have been in role 10 plus years. So then this is effective July 1st. Super interesting. Super interesting. I think, with all of us here on this specific call, I'd love to see how long you've been in role. So let's do a quick poll again, and let's run and see the tenure. And the reason why I'm doing this is we're going to introduce a maturity model. And there are a lot of assumptions that enablement practitioners make when they are being asked to do things from their CROs, from their CEOs. And I want to empower you with a framework and with the language and with the education so you can really help organizations get the most value out of enablement and have the biggest impact. And so here we go. I'm so curious. I wonder if the stats are going to be the same here with this group that are with us today. And so let's just waiting for oh, here we're going to go. We're going to see it. Drum roll, please. Look at that. 50% in a year. In 1 year, and there's 3 of you. All right, well, the 3 of you that are greater than 10 years, you guys got to do the you should be up on deck for the next ATD enablement webinar, because you're a veteran and there's a lot of you in the middle. Super interesting information. And so thank you for sharing, everyone. So listen, we're living in a world where enablement, sales enablement, revenue enablement is still relatively new, and it's maturing. But the problem is most of us aren't really aware of the impact that we're having. So in order for us to assess the health of our enablement programs, we need to start with a little bit of baselining on how and what sales performance looks like. What are some sales efficiency trends in the market and in the world today? And listen, we've done a ton of research, and this is information here that's verified and validated by CSO Insights, by Gartner and Forrester. So 20% of sellers are creating 80% of revenue. Just internalize that for a second. Like across the board, 20% of our revenue teams, 20% of our sellers are contributing to 80% of revenue. That's we'd hope that there'd be more, but it's a smaller number than we think. Here's the number that's really concerning. 30 to 50% of our sellers are only hitting quota, right? So we're normally when companies come to us, when companies come to SalesHood and they're looking for help with efficiency or effectiveness, and they want to, they're evaluating a sales enablement platform, whatever it is, they come to us for help. This is the primary thing they want to solve, is they want to lift the attainment, right? And what that means is how many salespeople are actually hitting quota, and that's what quota attainment means. And most companies come to us and they're sitting in the 30, 32%. Like Justin, just think about that for a second. Like companies are spending hundreds of millions of dollars hiring, recruiting salespeople. They're investing in training, they're investing in ramping, they're investing in tools, they're investing in playbooks, they're investing, yet most of them aren't even hitting quota. Crazy.
In average tenure, I mean, that's a lot of turnaround.
Plus the tenure, right? And so, I think I'm gonna ask, sorry, excuse me, I should have had that off. I'm gonna ask just broadly, you can post a note in the chat. How do these attainment numbers map to how you're doing things today, right? Is it aligned? Is it not aligned? We're not going to run a formal poll, but like just start asking yourself that question. And the bigger issue is a lot of enablement practitioners aren't close enough to the data to really understand where attainment fits. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is a lot of folks, a lot of enablement practitioners, a lot of sales leaders, they think they have to solve an onboarding problem first. And I just, the knee-jerk reaction for us enablement practitioners who we want to please, we want to build programs, we want to have an impact, we want to deliver what our CEOs and CROs think they need. And when they say we need a new onboarding, what they really mean is we got to figure out how to lift the attainment of our teams, and we can really spin a lot of cycles building the wrong things. So that's a little teaser for what's coming in the maturity model. And like I said, questions, throw them in the chat, and Justin, feel free to interrupt me or add your commentary as well.
Yeah, I think before we jump to the next slide, Dale mentioned that the 2080 number has been sort of the same for a long time, and is asking if you had any thoughts on why. There's so many new tools, new ideas, but that number has been stagnant. Any thoughts on why that would be?
Well, that number has been stagnant, and the attainment number is actually declining. Right. So if you look at the number 10 years ago, crazy, huh? Dr. Howard Dover is writing a book right now, which I just read the pre-release copy on the paradox of sales innovation. And it's almost like all this technology and everything that we're trying to do and trying to give our teams is having a negative effect on productivity. And the hypothesis that we have is the reason is folks are not focusing on what matters the most when it comes to creating programs that matter, measuring leading indicators versus measuring lagging indicators, developing content that is focused on deal progression. Organizations are not focused on reinforcing properly, both with peer-to-peer reinforcement and manager reinforcement. So there's a whole series of things, but Dale, I would just say, folks are not solving the right revenue problems when they're diagnosing what they should be doing in their organizations. And the framework we're going to show you in the maturity model will give you a view, a roadmap into what problems to solve in what order. And that's the purpose of this. And anything else, Justin? Any other questions on that one? No.
That's it for now.
But just think about it, right? So the 20 to 80%, it's been pretty stagnant. And then the 30 to 50%, right? So, but I think Dale may have seen my next slide, because the next slide, basically, enablement is not optimized for sales excellence, right? And so we're solving granular, siloed problems, but we're not thinking holistically across the life cycle of enablement, right? We need to build competence. And that means we need to create the right kinds of learning, the right learning environment. We need to create an environment where there is peer accelerated learning. We're not building and we're not reinforcing the confidence of our teams, right? And that means we're not, training them with just-in-time content. We're not enabling our managers to be there to reinforce the trainings that are coming. And then we're not being thoughtful about the content, right? And so, because as organizations, what's been happening in the last 10 or 15 years is organizations will create content and they'll, serve it up in a system, in a site, whatever. And the content will look like some beautiful PDFs. It'll be a new pitch deck, whatever that content is, sales plays, and they load it up somewhere, and then they do a launch call, and they launch it to everyone. And there's no real mastery of the conversations and the skills required to actually deploy the content in real life conversations. And so, a lot of times companies come to us and they say, we have so much content, but the content isn't activated. And activation of content means you got to be more thoughtful about what it takes to get your teams to really master the content. And so it's not enough to just give someone a pitch deck. It's not enough to just give someone a landing page with a bunch of links to things and just assume they got it. What we've learned over the years is they don't got it. And excuse me for being a little kind of tongue in cheek there, but so when you're thinking about your programs, I want you to take these three pillars, and this is software agnostic, right? Yeah, we want you to use Salesforce, but take software out of this. Think about a program. What's your strategy to build competence? What's your strategy to build confidence? And what's your strategy to get your teams to master the content? And how are you going to assess the effectiveness of all those programs so that way you can boost the efficiency of your teams? And by the way, this needs to be role-based. It can't be one size fits all. It's not okay to train your SDRs the same as your AEs, the same as your CSMs, the same as your managers, and the same as your channel partners, and the same as your account managers, and the same. So really, the competence and confidence and content needed by role is going to vary as well. So this is super interesting. I love the research that Forrester is doing on this to verify that this is a big gap. So I think we're really trying to answer questions around what's happening in the industry. And I'm going to go to the next slide as we progress forward into this story around how folks can assess the health of their teams. And so, here's a framework, right? So for those of you that are meeting me for the first time, Enablement Mastery is a book which I wrote back in 2019. It's based on my time at Salesforce, plus it's based on 8 years of really working with some of the fastest growing companies on the planet, like Confluent and Sage and RingCentral, working with some amazing companies to build a framework that we know works. And so, just think about the competence, the confidence, and content, right? Take any piece of content that you need to roll out, take any priority, take any initiative. And in this process, this framework works for it, right? You need to activate your content, which means it needs to be published the right way. It needs to be organized. It needs to be micro content. It needs to be accessible. It needs to be both video. It needs to be visual. Like, you got to really get content available to your teams. And it's not just about activation, then it's about curation. It needs to show up where they are, right? And it's so important, right? Think about those two steps, activation and curation. And then your teams need to learn. right? And learning, there's activity-based learning, there's show me, there's show me, don't tell me you know how to learn. There's so many ways, there's peer accelerated learning. But there's got to be and I think with ATD and with 39% of folks on the call here in training, I think you're probably doing a really good job on learning, but maybe missing the activation and the curation at the front end. But here's where I see things drop. Folks think learning and we're good, but actually then you got to coach. And coaching means organizing the content for your frontline managers so you can reinforce. It means creating a space so your teams can coach each other. Peer accelerated learning is a thing. And then you need to be able to continue the journey and guide your teams, right? And so meaning, whether they're using a Salesforce or whether they're using Microsoft or HubSpot, whatever the CRM system is, the content, the videos, the learning, the little tips, the tricks, everything that they need to be able to master the content so they can have elevated conversations, it needs to be there for them when they need it most. And that's when they're on calls, and that's before they prep for calls, and that's when they're on their way to see customers. Really important. And then we need to enable our teams to share the content with their buyers in deal rooms and landing sites that are personalized. Like you see here the steps. Like Justin, there's a lot going on, but it's a complete end-to-end process. This is why enablement is really taking off, because we're providing a framework to help organizations elevate their go-to-market and go-to-market faster. And then what you really want to look for is, if you subscribe to this process, if you believe in it, which I'm hopeful that if I'm not driving enough belief here, you read my book and you'll see it come to life there, or talk to any of the companies that we work with. But here's the so what. You need to measure impact. You need to correlate. So all the activation data, the curation data, all the learning, the assessments, the certifications, the pitch practice, all the reinforcement, all the coaching, that's data. And if you've got disparate systems, it's tough. Then you want to, the content consumption and then the content sharing and the buyer insights. Wow. Like if you're doing this right, you can roll out a pitch deck, you can roll out, some new training for a product release. And if you're following this process, you can have some real cool insights. And then you can know, why are some teams doing better than other teams? Why are, because you can see those 20% of the sellers that are generating 80% of revenue, you'll see what they're doing. And then you can replicate success faster. You can look and see, well, I've got 30% of my sellers are hitting quota, 70% are not. And look at that. The 70% that are not, they're actually not doing the learning. They're not getting any coaching from their managers, and they're not using the right content. Oh my God, let's get on it. And that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to give you insights so you can have a bigger impact on the outcomes of your organization and ultimately become the enablement hero that we want each of you to become. That's the framework. And I hope folks are appreciating the thoughtfulness that went into this. And before I move on, anything to add or any other comments? I'm trying to think.
No, I was actually jotting down some notes myself, because for me personally, this has already been sort of eye-opening, and just the concept of activation of content and thinking through what sort of content and resources and the formats and how you provide it to your sales team in a way that's impactful. It's not something I've fully thought through.
Yeah, no, it's the activation of content, the amount of people that come to us and say, I've got all this content, but no one knows how to use it. And they're not using it. How do we fix that problem? Great. Let's take a step back. Let's activate it. Let's curate it. And let's teach your teams. And then let's coach your managers so it gets reinforced. And then let's guide them. So no, I love it. I love it. I'm going to keep going, because really the centerpiece here is the maturity model. And folks need to really appreciate the maturity model. But before I go there, I wanted to introduce this concept. I've talked about it a little bit. And, learning tends to be accelerated. The impact of learning tends to be accelerated when we can create a space where folks can learn from each other. I think one thing sales enablement has taught HR is the value and importance of storytelling and video-based storytelling, and the importance of sharing knowledge within teams, across teams. Just quick story. When I was at Salesforce, we used to run those kickoffs like all the time. And at the end of the kickoff, I'd have salespeople walk up to me and say, what I love most about this was hearing the stories. And we would do that. We would bring teams together so top sellers and top performers can share their stories. And one of the reasons why I left Salesforce was I wanted to build a company that could deliver peer accelerated learning at scale, right? And at scale means, it's asynchronous. Folks can share videos, they can share content, they can share their information, and folks can find each other and learn from each other. It's really important. And there's some examples here on the right: video win stories, pitch practice, call shadowing, content sharing, peer coaching, role play. These are all things that if you can create a space where teams do this together, they will accelerate their results. And I love Corey Ayers' story, right? They've been trying to do a bunch of things a number of ways. And within their first 90 days, boom, they were able to, because they embraced the framework and because they were really prioritizing peer accelerated learning, practicing skills. They were practicing use case stories, video-based storytelling. They were sharing real life story. This is hot off the presses, right? This was during COVID, when they rolled this out, late last year. Within their first 90 days, they were generating more pipeline and closing more deals than ever. And the secret sauce is the peer-to-peer. And so the enablement process map is something that has evolved, but it's something that we've been working on for years and years and years. And it's intuitively, it's something that I've always embraced. But it wasn't until I wrote my second book, Enablement Mastery, and then worked through the process map with a number of companies that we realized that we needed a little bit more detail for folks to really appreciate the importance of the phases here. And they're deliberate. You can see across the top: phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, messaging alignment, sales process and skills activation, product proficiency, and then onboarding by role. Those are kind of primary pillars of an enablement program. And you can see there's a definition for each one. And then you can see there are outcomes that we're measuring for each one. And then you can see there is an enablement process that we need to have really nailed down. And I'm going to go through each one and while you're reading it. But messaging alignment, conversational competence, and having an entire organization, everyone in the revenue team, direct and indirect, having every employee, frankly, be aligned with kind of the fundamental message of who the company is, what are the value differentiators, is so important. It's kind of like the brand and the message and consistency of messaging is probably the most important thing a CEO and a CRO and a CMO should be working on. And as an enablement practitioner, as a training manager, each and every one of you should be asking yourselves, okay, how effective are we right now at measuring the messaging? How effective are we at measuring the impact of messaging alignment with our teams? I got some questions later on, but back in 2006, 2007, when we were pioneering sales enablement, Mark Benioff would pull me into his office and he'd flip through the new pitch deck and he would talk me through it. And then he'd have me give it back to him, and he'd make sure that I was on message, make sure that I understood the key messages, the flow, the transitions. And then he looked me in the eye and say, all right, you got it. Now it's your job to go train, coach, certify every single customer facing employee, starting with our presidents and VPs. Go. And I'll see you back in 30 days. And we would negotiate how long it would take. But that's real, right? And so right now, when we work with companies, we sit down with their CEOs and we say, start here, get everyone aligned on messaging, because how else are you going to win? And how else are you going to beat the competition? So that's messaging alignment, right? And you're measuring pipeline creation, pipeline conversions, and you're measuring the quality of the conversations that are happening. And look at the bottom there. You need executive buy-in, right? So I'm going a little deeper here, spending a little more time because it's really important. Once you've got messaging alignment, right? Fundamental pitch, short pitch, long pitch, all that good stuff. Then you move into sales process and skills activation, where you want to create repeatable sales plays around how your teams, you want to create repeatable sales process execution so that you can boost the efficiency. One of the big reasons why many teams, many companies are still struggling with sales efficiency is they're not taking the time to write down their sales process, the stages. They're not taking time to write down the activities. They're not taking time to write down how you move from stage 1 to stage 2, stage 2 to stage 3. And then most importantly, they're not training the teams and coaching the managers to reinforce, what it is. And I'm using the word sales process. You can also think a little more holistically as a buyer's journey, but that's where we really focus in on win rates and sales cycle time. And you need a plan for that, because it's not something that you can just do and get done. It's going to take time, and you need to have a calendar, and you got to get buy-in from your frontline managers. And it also has implications on cadence of frontline managers and how they're running their teams and QBRs. There's a lot here, right? But like you can see here, the pillars and how messaging alignment, sales process, and skill activation. And then we move into product proficiency. And I can't tell you, Justin, just check this out. The amount of times I'll present this slide, people raise their hands and they say, whoa. We got to start with product. And it's a debate. And I'll argue that with anyone. The reason why product proficiency is here is, if you overtrain people on product at the very beginning of their journey, or at the very beginning of their careers, they're going to over-index on talking about features, and they're not going to actually solve real business problems. If you give them enough content, basic pitch, some basic objections, and let them have enough so that way they can run and be successful on their first call, second call, and then pull in subject matter experts, that's a much better way to think about the organization. And then and your go-to-market, and then you layer in sales process execution. But if you give them product, guess what they're going to do? You're going to teach them product. They're going to want to show the product, and they're going to jump to demo, and they're going to miss the most important parts of the cycle: asking questions, being curious, solving problems, building relationships, and really following a process that's going to be more buyer-centric versus feature function centric. And that's why product proficiency is there. And you got to learn the product, right? But there needs to be a formalized certification program. Doing the pitch at the beginning is critical. And that's like a baby step, but that's why product proficiency is here. And really the idea of this slide is to help you realize that onboarding isn't the first thing you should solve. Because if you're going to go solve onboarding, how are you going to solve onboarding? You need some foundational content. You need the pitch, you need pitch practice, you need to get alignment with the leadership team, you need all of the micro pitches, objections, customer, you need a bunch of messages documented, and you need folks assessed, and you need your top performers sharing what's working, and then you need your sales process. So how are you going to build an onboarding by role if you haven't worked through messaging alignment, sales process, sales skills activation, product proficiency, competitive objection handling? So if you can work through these three pillars, then those three pillars become the foundation of your onboarding. And I hope folks appreciate this, right? Because your managers, your bosses, your leadership team will come to you and say, solve an onboarding problem. And you need to be able to take a step back and say, okay, why do you think we're trying to solve an onboarding problem? Wow, we're hiring a bunch of salespeople. Okay, well, what are our hiring goals over the next 3, 6, 9 months? And especially now, by the way, with a lot of the layoffs that are happening, with the recession, folks are kind of dialing things back. I'm getting calls from CROs, and they're saying, we're not hiring anyone, but we got to lift the efficiency of our existing teams. And so as enablement practitioners, as trainers, it's important to you that you ask the questions, what problem are you trying to solve? And don't let them push you to solve an onboarding problem when you have 100 salespeople, only 20 to 25 of them are hitting quota, and they're only going to hire 3 new salespeople in the next 90 days. Like you gotta understand those numbers. How many sellers do we have? How many folks do we have that are trying to generate quota? What does performance look like there? And go solve that problem. And then secondly, you can solve the onboarding problem after you get these core pillars nailed down inside of your go-to-market. That was a lot. I see there are a couple comments in the chat. What do you got?
Yeah, so I had a thought here. And what's the most common sort of error you're seeing people make here? Are they just focusing on phase 3 and 4 and sort of forgetting 1 and 2, which seem a little more foundational?
Absolutely, folks, listen, solving. So you are 100% right. Like folks, I ran one of these workshops on an enablement mastery workshop. I ran one in person, and there's some slides that we're going to go through. We're going to dive into each one. There was discomfort in talking about phase 1. It wasn't clear exactly who owned phase 2. Is it sales? Is it ops? Phase 3, there was a little bit more comfort, but folks were like, oh yeah, let's talk about onboarding. Everyone will do what they're really comfortable with, and enablement teams love building onboarding programs because it's what they know. Enablement
Mhm.
teams, enable folks love running boot camps because it's what they know. But the biggest mistake is solving an onboarding problem when you really have an attainment problem
Yep.
in your organizations. And then, yeah, listen, enablement, one of the roots of enablement is in training and product training and product certifications. And a lot of CEOs, a lot of CMOs will kind of try and over index enablement to be more product centric, and you've got to find the right balance. You won't always be 100% right, but if you walk away today with one thing, when's the last time we got our team certified on our latest messaging? If you walk away answering that question and elevating your enablement program by solving that problem over the summer and in the fall, because it's so critical now to get messaging right. Home run, mission accomplished. Thank you, ATD and Saleswood, for hosting this webinar. Beautiful. That's the biggest problem, that you jump to phase 4 and you're building something that is too shallow, not impactful, and not really going to solve the problem of lifting attainment.
Yep. So it actually ties in with a question we got from Debbie. She asked, what are your thoughts on how this framework applies if you already have an onboarding by role in place, but phase 1 through 3 isn't as mature? So is it really just going back to step 1 and focusing back in on the messaging and working through again?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say, listen, you're flying a plane. Let's do this metaphor. And you got to change, or you're driving a car. You got to change the tires, right? You've realized, and how are we doing on time? Yeah, we're going to go through a little detail on these, so you're going to see the detail behind each one of these, so you can really self-assess. But Debbie, listen, you got to keep doing your onboarding the way it is, but start shifting content, right? So you go in and you go, okay, let's roll out a global messaging certification program. So you build and we'll give you templates for it. We've got some great best practices. So you build that pillar, and then you swap out whatever you're doing in your onboarding or on messaging. You may or may not be doing it, and you insert it, right? Listen, at the end of the first week, every new hire should be able to deliver a 1 to 2 minute pitch, right? And that should be based on some foundational messaging that's coming from your CEO and CMO. And then they're probably going to do it again in week 2, right? And so, and then, yeah, everybody should be revisiting their buyer's journey and sales process these days, given everything happened in the economy. And if you haven't, you got to get it updated. Even the pandemic and remote selling has shifted. So, yeah, I'm not saying to throw it away yet. I'm saying, assess your onboarding based on some of the effectiveness of having pillars 1, 2, and 3 in it, and then just make your way through it and update it. I'd rather you raise your hand and say, hey, we got to update our onboarding and here's our strategy, versus someone coming in on top of you and saying, hey, you know what, it's not effective, we need to update it. Like, I want you to be empowered to make the changes and to ask for the resources so you can ultimately drive a bigger impact and elevate your career. Like, I'm going to show you some amazing people. Like I showed you Corey. Like, here's Sarah Frick. She's dramatic. Her boss was Siobhan Thatcher, right? Siobhan Thatcher, many of you may know. Sarah Frick. These are like rock star pioneers having amazing impacts. Look at the impact she's had at Ring Central. They're following the framework. They're building the foundational pillars. They're measuring the impact. You can see here when we worked with Ring Central, they're doing great, right? They did messaging alignment first. Then they did sales process. Then they did skills training. Then they did product training. By the way, messaging alignment, that took them 90 days. Then the sales process and skills training, that took them another 90 days. Then they rolled out product training. That took them another 90 days. They didn't try and do it all at once. And then they're like, okay, great. Guess what? Now we've got everything we need to build and roll out and update our onboarding. So they took all that 9-month work, and then they curated content, organized it by role, and then that became their onboard. So at the end of the first year, they were able to have a complete mature, everything was, they had the maturity model done across all the pillars. And then in the second year, they went real deep on manager coaching, manager enablement, and the reinforcement pieces. I want to give everyone an example, and just, if you don't know Sarah, you should connect with her on LinkedIn. If you don't know Siobhan Thatcher, you should connect with her as well. We've got some ways to connect with them as well through our some education that we have. I see more comments, Justin. Anything else?
Yeah, I had a question from Mary Rose where she had asked on the previous slide how you sort of message to others in the organization the time it takes to build these more foundational areas versus the need and the desire to put reps in the field as soon as possible.
Say it again.
So just how you sort of how you help others in the organization understand the time it takes to build these foundational skills versus the desire to put reps into the field and have them start selling right away, essentially.
So I think it's an interesting question. What are you measuring in a new hire's first 30 days?
Mhm.
And I think we're measuring the wrong things. I think we're not measuring leading indicators like email sent, meeting scheduled, pipeline created. So assuming a traditional 6 to 9 month ramp, I think folks tend to measure time to first deal and quota participation and quota attainment. But we want what you got to define selling, right? What does selling mean, right? We got to break it down into small little bite-sized chunks. And so, after the first week, after the second week, after the first 30 days, what specific skills do we expect and what activities do we expect our people to be able to perform? And rather than trying to jam everything into their first 2 weeks, all the way through to all the CPQ training and the proposal, like, what does that help anyone? They forget it all. Let's kind of slow it down and let's focus in on what are the first things you got to learn. I got to be conversational. I got to understand the messaging, and I need to be able to relay that message in a succinct way. I need to be able to effectively handle myself in a social setting with friends, with family. Because you're meeting people, you're telling people about your job, and you need to be able to start having those first meetings with either customers or prospects, right? So therefore, as well, that's why I've got messaging alignment, and we're teaching people. We're recommending to companies you get first pitch, second pitch, and you get customer stories and you get top objections, right? Those are some foundational messages that if you break that down into 5 or 6, 2 to 3 minute little micro assessments, that you can really get someone to be super conversational. They can master your content and they'll be competent and confident a lot faster than having them go through a complete onboarding program. They'll complete the onboarding, but you give them that initial, and then you teach them how to execute first call, second call. You give them the tools and the templates. So you got to balance it. Hopefully I'm answering it, Justin.
Yeah, I think so.
All right. So listen, I think every one of these, every one of these, I got to move my thing out of the way. Every one of these phases, and the deck's available. Every one of these phases, now I'm going in and I'm explaining in more detail. So messaging alignment, it means elevator pitch, corporate pitch, demonstrations, customer stories, objection handling, and top conversations. And what are we trying to measure? We're trying to increase pipeline and we're trying to get better conversations. How cool would it be if I could measure a new hire and know within the first 2 to 3 weeks, they're conversationally competent on front of the funnel conversations and they're actually generating quality pipeline? And that is a leading indicator that I'm sure frontline managers would love to see, right? And so this is the first phase. And so the question I'm going to ask you now is, when's the last time your team was certified on your latest messaging, right? That's a question you should ask yourself. And here are, kind of 5 scores. We're going to do this one, but not all of them, right? And so, if you want to assess the health of how you're doing relative to phase 1, if your messaging has been updated, you get a 1. If your sales team is certified on the latest messaging, you get a 2. If all customer facing roles are certified on the latest messaging, you get a 3. If you have real call verification where you are actually checking calls and you're verifying that they're using the right language, they're using the right slides, that they're conversationally competent and confident, boom, you get 4. If you're correlating these learning activities to leading indicators like pipeline created, meeting scheduled, you get a 5. And you can give yourself like halves, but I'm curious, those of you here right now, I'm going to check your chat. Like, what would you score yourself right now, in a 1 to a 5 in how you're doing? I'm just curious let's see if anyone's willing to share. So thank you, Debbie. Thanks for being honest. I can see a 3. I can see. Okay. So, I'm seeing someone say the last time they updated the messaging was 2014. So you see here, like there's congratulations for the 4. But these are quite in the process of updating messaging. So, last I checked, that means 1. Listen, we're scoring together. This is a safe place. This is an opportunity for you to self-assess. I can tell you right now, your CEOs are staying up at night. They're really nervous because they're wondering, and they're listening to those gong calls, and they're wondering, like, what are our reps saying? What are our teams talking about with our customers? And I was talking to CEO last night. He said, I actually went and listened to a bunch of calls, and I need to completely change my upcoming kickoff, and I need to retell everyone exactly who we are, why we exist, and what our core differentiators are, because I listened to 10 calls and I got 10 different answers on that call. And so, great. So you're getting a feel for how we self-assess, and so that's the first one, right? And so we'll do the second one. And so now we're talking about a bit more about number 5. Oh, okay. So let me go back up. So by the way, these are additive scores, right? So if you're doing some correlation, maybe you give yourself like a 0.2 out of 5 on the last one. But listen, correlation to leading indicators. So if someone is going to be certified and they're going to learn the new, let's just take the pitch again, right? You've got a new 3-minute pitch. You want everyone to learn it. 2-minute pitch. You want everyone to learn it. So they got to watch the video, and then they got to practice. They got to submit a video. Then they got to get scored by their managers. Then they got to go score 3 of their peers, right? Look what I'm accumulating. I'm accumulating activity. So A, you're tracking the scores and the completion and the activity that's happening by your teams. So that's half of the equation of 5. So do you know if people are certified? Has everyone shared the latest pitch, whether it's through practice or through a live call? And do you have a scorecard? And can you say with confidence that you've got 80 to 90% of your teams have completed a messaging certification? That's half of the equation, Deborah. The other half is then taking that data and saying, okay, I'm going to use Justin as an example. Justin has completed their certifications. First one, they actually did 8 practices. I can see how many practice sessions that they've done. They've actually gone in, even though they were asked to do 3, they watched 10. So Justin has accumulated, 82 activities. Compare Justin to Deborah, who Deborah did 1 dry run, only watched 1 other person, and didn't really, and got it done late. And so Deborah has accumulated 22 activities. So I take those activities, 22 to 82, and I compare it to, well, how many meetings have they scheduled? How much pipeline have they created? How much pipeline have they created? Have they progressed from stage 1 to stage 2? So that's what I mean by correlating to leading indicators. And so hopefully that was helpful, Deborah. Justin, I see another question. Can you share what you mean by certified? Sure. Certified means a lot of different things, a lot of different people. What I'm talking about is you take a priority, you take some content, and you ask people to learn it, and they need to demonstrate confidence and competence. And the demonstration of that, and the completion of that end-to-end process of getting people to learn, to demonstrate, and to have verification and validation that they're competent, then they would get some kind of accreditation, whether it's formal or informal. That's what I mean by certification. I believe in recognizing, and I believe in celebrating as much as we can, right? So rather than having an onboarding program that has like some 6-month end date, let's install a culture where we are celebrating successes. Pitch completed in the first week. Emails sent to prospects, and so they've learned how to do the emails in the second week. First call scheduled in the third week. Look at that. Like that's, you can monitor those activities, and you can celebrate them, and you can track them as baby certifications in the context of a broader learning path for someone in order for them to be successful. You got to break things down into smaller pieces. How are we doing on time? Quarter 2. All right. Let me do one more, right? So the second phase of the maturity model is sales process and skills activation. So this is all about teaching people the process, the buyer's journey, teaching them skills so they can be better discovery, better qualification, better negotiations, teaching them how to self-source pipeline. Like how many of us have pipeline coverage that is way below what we need, right? And we can't just assume our sellers are going to build pipeline. They need to be taught. They need to be given tools, email templates, sequences, cadences, voicemail templates, and they need to there's a lot that goes into getting our teams to be really great at self-sourcing pipeline. They need to master remote selling. They need to also know where their content is so that they can share it, and then we need to reinforce that. So there's a lot here. that goes in. You can see, and it has to map across the buyer's journey. And you can see that this needs to be rolled out in a very organized sequence way. And you actually need an enablement plan. By the time you're in phase 2, you need a proper enablement plan with hours, schedule, with calendars, with themes. It needs to be approved by your leadership team. And I'll tell you a little secret. If your enablement plan, if you don't get pushback from your leadership team on your enablement plan, meaning, hey, Justin, you know what? There's way too much here, right? You want to be like 8 to 12 hours post ramp, how much time people are spending learning and mastering your content. And if you present a plan and your leadership team doesn't push back, then you haven't put enough in there. there needs to be some healthy tension there where you want to train them as much as you can. You want them to learn. You want to give them more enablement, and your teams need to say, okay, let's prioritize. And so that's healthy tension, but it demonstrates that you've got a plan, and it puts you in the game, elevates you in the organization, and it really helps you earn your seat at the table. And it shows that you care and you're pushing hard. But you've got to be, you've also got to respect. And so there's a little bit of balance there. So let's do the same thing here, right? How documented is your sales process? How well trained are your teams? How ready is your team for remote selling? And so, so check this out. Same thing as before. And so what I'm leaving you with here is, have you updated your sales skills and sales process? And have you trained people on your updated sales process and sales skills, right? And this is updated within the last, 22, right? I'm not even just saying post-pandemic. It has been updated for 22, because guess what? Our world's very different now. Have the sales assets been retagged, reorganized, re-updated, and are they accessible just in time? Now, have you layered in a program that delivers skills and process training to your frontline managers so they can reinforce the skills and process that you've trained your reps on? Have you correlated all of the training and the learning and the content consumption and the content sharing? Have you correlated that to win rates and cycle time? And then finally, how ready are your teams to engage buyers remotely, to engage in virtual digital selling, right? So same thing as last time. I'm curious, how are you all doing on this one? How would you rate yourself right now, 1 through 5? And so, for example, if you've updated the skills training, but you haven't trained, you get a half, right? If your sales assets are sitting on a portal, but they're not showing up just in time, you get a half. So you really kind of get like 1 out of 5. So I see a 3 there. Nice. So some organizations that have a heavier ops focus, they tend to do a little better here. Other organizations that are more, L&D and HR centric, they do better on onboarding. So yeah, 2.5. So anyway, you get a feel for how this works, right? This presentation is ideal for you to take your team through. This is an ideal presentation for you to think through, self-assess yourselves. In the replay and in the follow-up, you'll get access to the PDF, and you can always reach out to me on LinkedIn, Eli@saleshead.com. Happy to, share it with you if you're interested in just going direct to the source, no problem. And, I'd say I'm reading one out loud here. I would say we are a 4 on sales process, but sales assets a 2. We have a lot of cleanup and work to do here. So amazing. So that means you're kind of a 3-ish. But it's you're basically scoring yourself, like on the first one, what do you give yourself out of 1? On the second one, what are you giving yourself? Like it's like, are you giving yourself a 1 out of 1 or hopefully I'm being clear there. Justin, am I being clear on the scoring?
You are. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, good. Deborah. Okay, got it. So I appreciate everyone. So listen, I'm not going to go through the rest of these because I want to, I'll let you all go through, but product proficiency, there's a similar framework here. And then similarly, we're asking you on questions, and you can self-assess yourselves on the questions, and you can get the deck and go through it. But like I said last time, everybody did great with onboarding. Everybody scored themselves 5, but when you get into it and you look at the detail, you realize that you don't really have those core pillars, and you're building an onboarding and not really solving an attainment and a conversational competence and a mastering of your content solution. And so anyway, these are some of the questions I'd ask myself on onboarding. And things that people don't necessarily have strength on is activity-based learning, right? So teaching people how to send emails and verifying and validating that those emails are having an impact, measuring and looking at open rates, teaching people how to open up and close meetings and how to create agendas and how to customize presentations, like pretty hands-on stuff that needs to happen in onboarding, that if you're not being thoughtful about the messaging and how to apply messaging in the context of the buyer's journey, if you're not being thoughtful about sales process and skills, how are you really delivering an onboarding that's going to drive the impact that you want in your organization? And so there's a maturity model. And here's what I want to leave with you right now, right? Listen, Saleshood, we're so grateful for the opportunity to be here. If any of you are struggling with systems, or if any of you are doing evaluations on a sales enablement platform, hey, give us an opportunity to let you apply the best practices in the framework. Give us an opportunity to earn your business. But most importantly, like I said, we're all about content. We're all about helping you elevate the profession. So if any of you want to really go deeper, we have a free course. It's a sales enablement leadership course. You can find it on our homepage. It's amazing. 6 self-paced classes, all about being strategic. So Siobhan Thatcher delivers a class on being strategic, measuring outcomes, executing sales plays, delivering onboarding, doing messaging alignment, and ultimately building the business case. So Justin, that's it. I know that it's crazy. It's already been about 50 minutes, and I'm appreciating everyone for all your participation during this. I'm going to stop sharing. The deck's available. Please, regardless of whether you're using Saleshood or not, right? Embrace the principles, embrace the framework that we've introduced to you, and lean into our courses. They're available here for each and every one of you, so you can be successful and you can elevate yourselves, elevate the impact that you're having. And listen, we're super passionate about the profession of sales enablement, and we're here to help the profession grow and help each and every one of you be the best you can be. And Justin, to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Eli. That was, I've done a lot of webinars, and this was just really packed full of really interesting, good information. So thank you for sharing with us.